Okay, this is probably my most popular question I get asked all the time. How do I know when the right time to buy a home is? And a lot of times, most people that ask me this question are deep in thought about market timing. Like, is it the right time? Are the interest rates in the right place? And those sorts of questions, which actually are probably the least important questions when you're thinking about buying a home and taking on a mortgage. Because truth be told, and I've got a neat little graph inside of this article, that shows mortgage rates over the last 6 months and even a longer period of time, mortgage rates over the last 5 years. And you'll see that during those times, there's very little fluctuation. We hear about mortgage rates rising and falling all the time in the news, but really the incremental ticks in those changes don't make much difference in the overall payment. In fact, during the last 6 months, the mortgage rates have not moved more than 0.5%. And even over the last 5 years, they haven't moved more than 1%. So that's anywhere from about $50 to about $125 in sort of the average size mortgage. So on a monthly payment. So the actual change in rate isn't sort of the leading thing you should be thinking about. And even for those incremental savings, because a mortgage tends to take about 30 days to close, there's a tendency that unlike sort of making a play in the stock market or purchasing a stock, the chances of you actually hitting that timing right and being able to close within that rate window so you get you kind of the perfect rate is probably unrealistic. So it's more important when you're thinking about a mortgage loan that you're probably going to have over 30 years to kind of think bigger picture about your situation and whether or not it's the right time for you to buy a new home. So let me take you through 3 things that I always go through with clients that are trying to determine is now the right time for them to buy. And so oftentimes it's a first-time home buyer, or maybe they've been renting for a long time, or maybe they were a homeowner before and then started renting and want to become a homeowner again. So these are kind of the 3 standard questions that I always want to know from my client before recommending whether they should buy a home. So first and foremost, what is your life plan? What is your plan over the next 5 to 10 years? Yes, you're probably getting a 30-year fixed rate loan, but the statistics tell us that the chances of you actually being in that home for the span of 30 years or holding that mortgage for an entire 30 years is pretty low. And actually, the statistics tell us somewhere between 5 and 7 years. So I always ask, what are you going to be doing over the next 5 to 10 years? Is this a place that you're planning on staying? Are you stable in your job? Are you stable in your family? Is your career sort of setting you down here? Maybe you're starting to have children and they're going to grow up in this community. Really think about this. But if your family or your particular career situation or just you in general don't feel stable over the next 5 to 10 years, or that this is actually going to be the place that you're going to call home, then it might not be the right time to consider buying a home. Maybe you need the flexibility of renting. So that's fine. But this is what should be the number one question you're asking is what is that 5 to 10 years look like? And does it make sense for me to get tied into a home? Which of course has all kinds of financial advantages. But if you're going to be moving, it may be a little bit less of the ideal plan. Number 2, what's your credit profile? A lot of times people move this to number 1. I actually think it's more important to move to number 2 because this is going to impact you the most. Your credit profile is just sort of your overall picture. Most people focus on the credit score, but really it's a combination of these 3 factors. So first and foremost, I want you working towards a credit profile that's going to get you the best rate and the lowest cost loan. And so typically that is someone that is either 680 plus or 720 plus. This is ultimately where you want to get to, but this is where you start to get significant price breaks, both in rate and cost of loan around this 680 mark. Now certainly you can get a mortgage all the way down to 620 and even into 580s, but ideally this is where the loan is going to start to become the most affordable for you. And when you get up into the 720, you can expect to get the very best rate and the very lowest cost mortgage. So you want to start targeting this. And if you're in this range of credit scores, you're probably in the right zone to start thinking about buying a mortgage. The other thing that's super important is your debt to income ratio. So one of the major factors that lenders are looking at is your ability, of course, to repay that loan. So this particular ratio gives them a lot of information on whether or not you're going to be able to easily make that payment month after month for the next 30 years. So this equation is actually relatively simple. It's looking at your minimum payments on your debt. So the minimum payment for your credit cards, the minimum payment for your car loan, and those sorts of things, versus how much income, gross monthly income, do you bring in. And so we want that ratio to be relatively low without housing cost, so about 35%. And then when you add in the new mortgage payment, we'd like to see that around 45%. Now you can usually qualify for a loan up into the 50% range, but again, we want there to be significant margin for you to be able to pay that monthly mortgage without consuming all of your income or assuming that you're going to have to make more income in the future. So we like to look at ratios like that. So our overall credit profile, of course, in here as well is down payment. So the more down payment that you can afford to put into the equation, again, that will strengthen your credit profile and make you better ready to buy that home. So the minimum usually is 3 to 3.5%, depending on whether you're getting a conventional or an FHA loan. But you can get up to 20% will get rid of mortgage insurance. And so we love to see this somewhat above the minimum, but again, strengthening that credit profile. If you're in the strong range, 680 and above, you have a debt to income ratio with your new housing payment about 45%, and you're able to easily and already have saved that 3.5%. Then number 2 is probably a check mark. You're probably getting into the range of where it would make sense to consider buying your home. And then, of course, your current finances. So all of this being considered and including your down payment and your closing costs and those sorts of things, and then your monthly payment, we don't want that to strap you or to give you stress in your finances. So you also want to consider where you are today. Do you have that? I'm a big Dave Ramsey fan, so do you have that $1,000 worth of emergency fund? Do you have that additional 3 to 6 months worth of income in reserves for, again, life's bigger emergencies? And then on top of that, hopefully you've started to invest a little and you have some margin in your monthly. And then at that point, it probably makes a lot of sense to start considering the advantages, especially financial advantages, of owning versus renting. So these are the 3 things that I like to go through with my clients to figure out, is it the right time to buy a house? Is your life plan looking to be stable over the next 5 to 10 years? Do you have a strong credit profile so that you can get the best rate and the lowest cost? That means 680 and above, debt to income ratio around 45%, and hopefully at least a minimum down payment, maybe a little bit more than that. And then do I have a nice, stable, current financial picture with my emergency funds and reserves intact, and possibly even making a little investment along the way. So love to talk to you more if you have any questions about whether or not it's the right time for you in your personal situation to buy a new home.